Have you ever seen this diagram? It's Dante's Inferno from a 14th century fictional writing called The Divine Comedy. It depicts the experiences of hell based on one's sins and the level of torment one will receive for all eternity. I found a similar one on the internet, but for fashion. However, it is horribly outdated, most notably for having Rick Owens so deep on the tier list. What in the world? I personally don't care for a lot of the brands on the forefront and the front page, because there are so many smaller brands who are producing way more interesting garments. They just have not had the amount of time to gain traction, or they just serve a really niche demographic. So I was inspired to make my own, but for Instagram fashion brands. And instead of the 9 circles of hell, I'm just going to make a generic tier list. Starting on the D tier,
Yori Sport.
When this brand first came out, it had a very different aesthetic to what it has now. Liam Yori, the brand's owner, started pattern making and garment dyeing denim. The brand has since turned into a more freeform style, focusing on sport-inspired themes with a high fashion aesthetic, which I, for one, am actually quite fond of. Things like sweatsuits, oversized denim, and a few essentials like underwear. The brand focuses on the underground and does not at all try to target mainstream interest. Just by looking at it, the marketing on this brand is by far the best part. Going for a do-as-thou-wilt approach to making reels and posts. Sometimes Liam will even just post him in front of the camera talking about whatever comes to his mind. But at times, it feels like a one-off brand. Styling the pieces together lacks cohesion at times, and it's hard to see fashion enthusiasts wearing a full Yori fit to anything other than a photo or video shoot. With the current lineup of pieces and by taking a view at the Instagram page, it can easily feel like Yori is a one-trick pony. A lot of the flagship pieces feel almost indistinguishable from Vêtements or an Adidas piece. I just don't see the longevity in these pieces, and hopefully they can come up with something slightly new and a creative direction slightly different to gain interest from a slightly wider demographic. Moving on to the C tier is everyone's 2016 favorite, Alyx, a brand that has severely overplayed its star player, the roller coaster belt. I would say Matthew Williams' creative direction had every single streetwear enthusiast in a chokehold in the mid-2010s. But as time went on, people's interests changed and brands moved on from the whole buckle utility scene. Nowadays, the brand focuses on blanks that use hardware and quality to give the pieces that creative personal touch. And I, for one, loved the chest bag and the buckle necklace, both of which I do own somewhere in my closet. Moving away from that rough goth aesthetic they carried when it was first launched to a more corporate style, but still dominated by black. The most notable pieces that they have released were seen years ago, and innovation is not something that comes to mind when we look at their latest collections. It almost seems like the brand is still riding off that success that they once had and the few big influencer collaborations they had in times past. Being the creative director of Givenchy between 2020 and 2024, we saw some very unique collection pieces under Matthew Williams' leadership, but he ultimately left the fashion house to focus on his own label, Alyx, probably due to Adrian Chen giving him an absolute bag. It's no surprise that the recent collections have been played more safely to satisfy shareholders rather than, the customers. Apart from some very unique pieces like the buckle puffer jacket, which I do own 2 of them, and the bags, there is nothing really that stands out from their previous collection or even their competitors in the same space. Brands like Rick Owens, they're constantly innovating what they produce every year, and every year they still maintain their signature flair, signature style, but something different always pops out of their collection, which gets people talking about it and gets people excited about it again. And it's safe to say that not many people are really checking for their latest releases these days, as much as before. Putting the buckle on every single piece will just make you look like a utility device. Going down the rabbit hole to E, we have Vale. And no, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Despite the fact that there are literally 50 other brands with the same name, Vale is a New York-based brand that looks like a New York-based brand. There are a few pieces that do stand out to me as being quality, such as these, but for the most part, many of the pieces are just thrown out there. The brand started with custom cut and sew garments, making very detailed knitwear, which at the time was not seen anywhere else on the internet. But after seeing initial success, the creative direction just went left field. They started releasing just about anything, and it started to look like a typical Atlanta brand with a lack of cohesion and a jumbled direction. It's almost like YouTuber merch at this point. There really isn't much to say. Second in E, we have Denim Tears, or should I say BLM Tears, because I'm all for having meaning and talking about issues like inequality and racial justice, but in recent years, this brand has just become an echo chamber for rehashed designs and SJW terminology stamped on the pieces. I, for one, am tired of seeing this foreign print design on every single piece. This tag screams Abercrombie and Fitch, and this design here is off-white levels of laziness. Tremaine Emory has one mission, and that mission revolves around blacktivism. And I'm all for that, being a black person myself, but not at the expense of making great pieces that people actually want. He tried to bring the same direction when he was in charge at Supreme, and they gave him the boot, or he gave himself the boot. He wanted a collaboration with a black activist, and Supreme said, why don't you give us a collaboration that we can actually make money off of?
Here's the thing with Supreme, and I didn't resign because of the AJ images. I resigned because of their thoughtlessness and their lack of response when I was trying to garner discourse.
In response, Emory then threw his toys and ultimately resigned from the brand because the corporate at Supreme wouldn't let him turn their brand into another George Soros psyop. What a shocker. People don't want to wear clothes that have slaves with whip marks on the graphic. There's not much else you can say about this train wreck, apart from the boring designs, the brand messaging alienating at least 50% of their target demographic, and them only having 3 hit pieces since the brand's launch. Denim Tears will be crying for a lot longer if they don't get their act together. The F tier is for brands that are down astronomically. It is sort of like a self-imposed jail cell. Sicko, Born from Pain, is just an overall terrible brand. Formerly spearheaded by the king of controversy himself, Ian Connor, and I, for one, even own 2 pieces from this brand because in 2018, I was dumb, and this brand was still kinda hot. But today, most of the pieces look like Amazon merch, with very lazy creativity put in the graphics, and seeing how almost 50% of the designs are unoriginal and or just outsourced to other artists who may or may not get paid for their work, it is hard to even defend Ian Connor. I doubt he even is affiliated with the day-to-day operations of the brand at this point. I'm sure at this point his team only does the bare minimum to maintain the brand just long enough until he's ready to do his latest cash grab drop. If you order from him, it is definitely a hit or miss whether you will even get the products. Personal favorite brands, Vuja. Kenny Jima is an absolute genius for the most part. He has mastered the ability to make blanks interesting. I would say he went way harder with his first 3 collections, but the brand still has a loyal and dedicated fan base who are willing to drop $700 Renos on some Japanese denim. I, for one, am one of these people. If it's because he only produces 10 pieces per style, or maybe he just has an army of Vuja stands locked in his basement ready for him to drop, either way, his items sell out fast. I mean, you even feel like you are in Japan while wearing these. Taking a minimalist approach to design, he makes earth tones and subtle statement pieces in the garments that carry the weight of the world on its shoulders. Having said all this glazing, he came under fire for his ethics on things such as not making enough stock to purchase on the website, and just making it seem like the pieces were more in demand than they actually were. He also was accused of selling fake archival pieces from 20 years ago. You know the works. The B spot is a nice fit for Vuja, seeing as how a more adventurous creative direction and being a bit more transparent to the customer base would go a long way. But I, for one, am very impressed by his designs, color palettes, silhouettes, pieces, and experimentation. He's definitely had a lot of hits, and it would be very good if he could continue this run. Please, God, if you hear my prayer. And now for the absolute cream of the crop, the S tier. 424 is my personal all-time favorite brand currently. Guillermo Andrade is a class act who started as a streetwear designer and worked his way up to making iconic pieces based in Italy. But he is sick in his head if he thinks I'm about to drop $11K on a gorilla suit, which, by the way, is an absolute amazing piece. The brand has had years to find their footing, and stumble they did. They produced a generic rehash of Yeezy, Raf Simons, and off-white regurgitated pieces, and The SS armband did not help their case at all. These things only succeeded in making them look edgy, along with the cringe graphic tees. But fast forward 10 years in the future, Andrade is putting out some absolute heat. The 2024 collection literally does not even have one bad piece in it. Everything is fresh, everything is ripe. I mean, he somehow even made skinny jeans look cool again. And I, for one, am loving this trend where American designers are moving their entire production to Europe to have them give that authenticity to their brand and maximize the quality output. The world doesn't take American-based labels that serious these days in the fashion industry, and for good reason. The experimentation here is insane. Cashmere, leather, denim, synthetic materials. 424 encapsulates all textile pathways. It's like turning your brand into a garment factory that just happens to make high fashion on the side as a hobby. The simple yet groundbreaking designs being pumped out is top notch, and I for one can't wait to blow a bag on my next 424 piece. There's no question that this brand is an S tier level combining streetwear and high fashion the right way. Keep it up, 424.